The holy grail in this industry is organic growth. That's what drives valuations. And frankly, now that inorganic growth has gotten much more expensive versus 5, 6 years ago, it's important that you focus on organic growth first and then inorganic growth.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Next Mile. I'm your host, Kyle Van Pelt, co-founder at Milemarker. And today I am joined by John Bunch. John is the new CEO at Allworth Financial, a leader with deep expertise in scaling founder-led RIAs into enduring, professionally managed firms. And also, he enjoys hobbies that involve him being outside in negative 20-degree weather and trying to get unplugged, such as ice fishing, way up north. John, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks, Kyle. Happy to be here.
Okay, I normally jump into one of my first questions, but before I do that, I've got to ask you, how do you stay warm when you're ice fishing in 20 below? I'm sure you've been asked that before, but I've got to know as a kid from the South.
First of all, when you're ice fishing at that kind of temperature, the ice actually is close to 3 foot thick, which many people can't even believe that ice gets that thick. Yeah, protective gear, right? You know, you ride a snowmobile out, you wear a snowsuit. If you happen to fall through the ice, your snowsuit actually makes you float in the water so you don't sink. And then you put a tent over yourself and put a heater inside and off you go.
Yeah, it's amazing. That heater is not gonna melt 3 foot thick ice, right? So you can make it toasty in there.
Yeah, it's still pretty cold.
That's awesome. So I know you've listened to a couple of these. I asked everybody the same first question. Yours is not going to be any different, John. So hundreds of these conversations on air and off air, everybody has their own unique path to this space. Sometimes that path is traditional. Sometimes people didn't even know this was an industry to come into. But everybody, whether traditional or untraditional, has what we call a money moment. And that's the moment in their life where the light bulb clicks and they decide, this is it. This is what I want to do for my career. So John, for you, what was that money moment that led you to sitting in the chair you're in right now, having this conversation today?
Yeah, Kyle, it's an interesting question. I thought a lot about it, having listened to several of your shows. I'm going to actually go back 50 years, which is probably different. I think everyone says they've seen bad financial advice or something happened where they wanted to be on the right side of the table with clients. You know, when I thought about this 50 years ago, this is way before the internet, I would sit at the dinner table with my grandfather and he would hand me the newspaper and tell me the names of the stocks he owned. I'd have to tell him what the actual close of the stock was. It was a way for me to learn fractions and then how many shares he had. And I actually had to do the math by hand to actually build his net worth based on the equities he held. And I think that was my first introduction into the markets. And, you know, I really had never thought of it as, well, I want to be kind of in this profession, but I was always since that time interested in the markets and interested in business in general. And then throughout my career, you know, I've had some great opportunities, right? I started when Charles Schwab was a very small company. We had a few thousand people. I left when we had 21,000 people. So I've had what I think is a really interesting career from an evolution of our industry. But I do think that, you know, I owe my grandfather a lot of pats on the back for getting me into the space.
That's so cool. I love that story. That's amazing. Now you've got really neat tools where you can just click a button and figure out what the close was and all of that. So they made your life a lot easier today, huh, John?
Yeah, I have 4 girls and my daughters don't really understand what life before the internet is like. Hopefully they'll listen to this and get themselves a little more educated.
Yeah, that's amazing. All right. So you have said in some other press that you think that Allworth is in its 3rd generation. The first was all defined by organic growth under Pat McLean and Scott Hansen. I know they were really big with radio shows and a lot of the ways that they grew. We had Scott as a guest on the show. So this is a nice kind of second run with Allworth, which I'm thankful for. You talked about how the 2nd generation was a focus on inorganic growth and acquisition. You guys were bringing firms into the fold. You were growing through buying established practices or bringing them. But you believe you've entered or you're entering the 3rd generation of Allworth Financial. So what's the focus now?
Yes, I talk to the employee base about this quite often, which is my motto right now is evolve, elevate, and execute. And you're right, this is Allworth 3.0. And when I think about that, it is about bringing the value proposition a bit up market, bringing the skill sets of our advisors up market, and really using technology to get a competitive advantage in the overall financial services marketplace. So we're definitely entering that 3rd kind of generation of Allworth.
How much of that is driven by all of the inorganic acquisition or inorganic growth, rather? I know at Milemarker, we have conversations all the time about as people are buying firms, as they're trying to integrate them into what they're doing, the tech can become such a mess. So as you're evolving, how much of that is just coming from the learnings of the first two generations?
Yeah, listen, we have a lot to be thankful for because of our founders, right? Both highly ethical founders that really were pioneers in marketing, which really set forth the whole notion of organic growth. And so the way I look at it is inorganic growth by itself is not very valuable for both shareholders or employees. And so you have to be able to buy firms and then grow those firms and expand the offerings. And I just recently actually saw a report that came out last month, which is we've done 43 acquisitions, and I think 39 of the 43 are net organic growth positive this month or for the year.
Wow.
Which is huge, right? And if you look at the 4 that are not, I think it's off by 5 or 6 million. So it wouldn't take too many accounts actually to put the full playbook ahead of the full firm kind of in a positive position in organic growth. However, the holy grail in this industry is organic growth. That's what drives valuations. And frankly, now that inorganic growth has gotten much more expensive versus 5-6 years ago, it's important that you focus on organic growth first and then inorganic growth. Because I think if you get that right, then you're building a scalable business for the future. And in Allworth 3.0, our new focus on inorganic growth is more about tuck-ins and building out our footprint, as well as strategic acquisitions, not just succession planning, which is really where Scott Hansen really started this. And it's, I think, a lot more strategic today.
That's great. Okay, we've got to double click on the organic growth thing.
Yeah.
We talk to people about it a lot on the show. I'm always trying to understand how people are thinking about this. When you really look at the numbers, organic growth tells a pretty sad story in the industry. I mean, I think that they say that organic growth is maybe 2% across the board, but if you remove like the top 10 fastest growing firms, organic growth is actually negative for most businesses. But it sounds like when people come to Allworth, you guys are helping these firms actually grow. So what is it that you guys are so good at that is helping you have positive organic growth rates?
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. It's an unfortunate situation in this industry where dividends and interest and the market appreciation has really carried a lot of these firms. And if you strip those away, and especially market appreciation, a lot of these firms are going backwards, which you could argue these firms are actually a dying subset of our industry. Our philosophy is you need to have 4 or 5 really strong growth pillars at the top of your business. You've heard a lot in this industry about the custodial referral programs. We think that's an important element, but we really didn't start the business that way. We started with true organic growth channels. So whether it's the radio show, I think our podcast just went past a few million podcast listeners. We've got verticals like the airline industry, have the largest airline practice in the RIA industry for pilots. We do the same thing for dentists and doctors. We also do the digital media. We do social. We do paid leads. And we manage those things really tight, right? So if you said to me, boy, I want to see leads from 3 years ago down to the individual lead level, I can tell you exactly what's happened, if it converted, what my payback was, and then probably why it didn't convert and what we've done differently to change our model. So I think it starts there, which is it's about data and execution. And I've got a great CMO that really monitors this. My advisors are really on top of it, but you need a machine. Now, that doesn't mean that every company we buy or every firm we buy grows immediately. I think what's most important is get the culture right, get the existing clients happy, make sure that you don't lose clients, and then build upon that. And I think there's been a lot of lessons learned over the last 4 or 5 years, but I think that we've turned that corner, and our organic growth the last few, what I would call in 2025, has been probably the best we've seen for quite some time.
That's fantastic. Outstanding. And I think growth is a mindset, right? You have to desire it. You have to want to do it. It's got to be a part of the culture, which I think is great. So I want to ask you this. I don't think it's necessarily about hard numbers, but if you go back, up to today, whatever it is, if you look at a percentage of revenue or a percentage of what you're doing that you're spending on growth into that engine, and it could be broad swaths, but I think there's a lot of different takes on this. How much should I spend on marketing? How do I make sure I'm not wasting it, et cetera, et cetera? But you have to spend to grow. I think everybody knows that. But when you look at the business as a whole, what is a target percentage you're aiming for to spend for organic growth?
Yeah, I've been doing this since 2012 in the RIA space. And when Smart Asset was just a very small company and we started buying leads from them, I actually look at it more as in payback, right? So if I can acquire an account and have less than a 2-year payback, I will continue to spend money until I hit that threshold. Now, you have to also be okay with failing fast and fixing things along the way and test and learn, because not every channel is going to work right out of the gate. And I think that's really important. And that's why data plays a big part of this. We have basically a full service agency inside of Allworth. We operate across all these channels. We've got an infrastructure that if we create a lead, let's say from the media or kind of, an internet type lead, we're going to call that lead within 2 minutes to have a first introductory offer or conversation. And then we take it to an appointment level. And, we consistently mystery shop our peers to make sure we understand what everyone else is doing and really learn from what's happening in the marketplace. We spend millions of dollars a year on marketing, but to me, it's more important to look at it as a payback versus what your budget is. Because I have a really supportive board. If I go to my board and say, listen, we have found a channel that we have a 6-month payback on, they're naturally going to say, spend as much money as you possibly can, because organic growth is what drives value.
That's great. I love that mindset. I think that's exactly right. Find the channels that are working and invest in them and measure something on how is it working, not how much you're spending. That's a great mentality.
Kyle, you hit it on the head earlier, which is this is about a mindset. And so I became the CEO 2 years ago. And with any new CEO, you get the good, the bad, and the ugly, and everyone tells you what's happening in the firm. I met with all employees in the first 90 days. And it wasn't necessarily a mindset. I think that it was starting to be a mindset. But I think if you go talk to the employee base today, whether you're in operations or customer service or an advisor, people are excited about growth. And if you think about it, people want to win, right? And so if you feel like you're winning, you feel like you're doing great things for clients, that's just infectious. And Darla Seipold, who runs our advisors, has done a phenomenal job of getting people on side. And once you have them on side, it's just how much gas can you put in the machine to keep rolling forward?
That's incredible. Let's talk a little bit about that and showing people how the machine works. So I'm trying to figure out how to tie this together. I don't have the best segue for this, but
Sure.
You've worked so closely with many founder-led firms, right? That you're bringing into this incredible Allworth umbrella and organization that you've built. But founder succession is deeply personal, right? They've built this. They have a culture. They have a mindset. Hey, John, the reason why you want our firm is because it's working. Like, we've done a good job of this. We've figured this out. We know how to do this well. But then you're coming in and saying, hey, yes, absolutely agree with that. But also, let's try and apply some tweaks to your culture, to the mindset, to help this grow even more, to help make it even more valuable, et cetera. Can you talk about the nuance there of what it's like to navigate really deeply personal relationships with founder-led firms?
Yeah. And so I've been lucky, right? I've had the opportunity to work with some great founders, from Chuck Schwab to Adam Bold at the Mutual Fund Store to Rick Edelman to Scott and Pat, the Ricketts family at Ameritrade. I think it starts first with your mentality as a CEO, which is, I believe I'm a fiduciary to their dreams, right? They built this firm with really an intent to, it wasn't about making money for any of them. It was about making people's lives better. And I think if you start there and you respect the past, but also listen intently and give them hope for the future, so that it isn't just a, hey, you did a great job in the past and I'm now the person that's going to drive the future. It has to be a partnership, right? And so I actually just had a conversation yesterday with Adam Bold. I haven't worked for Adam for 6 or 7 years. I see Rick Edelman quite frequently. I meet with our founders probably every 2 weeks just to talk about the health of the business. And it would really be foolish for me not to listen to them. And I think part of that's just checking your ego at the door and making sure the best ideas win. And so when I first started, when we would do integrations, they talked about the Allworth way. And I said, hey, I got a new idea. Why don't we just do it the right way? Because that doesn't mean that everything that Allworth does is right. And I think that if you bring that to the table every day and you build a culture where people don't fear for their jobs or for failure, I think you're going to build something that's unique and special. And I've witnessed that in my career, and I hope to continue that with Allworth.
Oh, unbelievable answer. I think you being the fiduciary of their dreams is quite the mic drop moment. We're going to have to clip that one. That's a great line and a great statement.
Yep.
All right, but let's talk about this. The Allworth way, acquiring firms, trying to help them grow. It makes me think about integration, and this is a challenge. I don't care if you're in an RIA industry or if you're in manufacturing and you're buying other things. Whenever you acquire an entire another business, integration is always challenging. And I think the humility you just displayed of maybe it's the Allworth way, whatever, but let's make sure we're focused on getting it the right way. You have to win the hearts and minds of the people you're integrating is something I've heard you say before.
Yep.
So how did you learn that?
Listen, I think it goes back to the 1990s when I worked at Charles Schwab, right? This was almost pre-internet days, and the massive growth that we saw at Schwab, Dave Patrick and Chuck Schwab were really, really good at making sure that you understood the why, not just the what. And I followed John Carter, a Harvard professor on change, since those days. And I think it starts there, which is employees will do virtually anything you want as long as they understand why you're doing it. But if it is, I had this saying, which is you can have them be compliant or committed. Which one would you rather have? And I want those folks committed, because if they're compliant, when it fails, it's all on me. When they're committed, it's a team effort and people will find a way to win.
Wow. That's awesome. Man, you're full of these like great Cliffy one-liners. I love it. It's amazing. All right, let's talk about the evolution of the space. Yep. And one thing I've seen so much is more and more integration, speaking of tax into the practice. And I know you led a pretty large tax firm before you came over and did this. Yep. More and more RIAs are trying to either acquire CPA firms or they're partnering deeper. It seems to me that there's a move away from referring that out and trying to just keep it in-house and be a full service shop. You have seen both sides of the coin there. Is that merely just a hunger from clients to get more services from their RIA for what they're paying? Or is it because it's a better experience? Is it both? What is driving this trend to start turning RIAs into a hybrid of an RIA and a CPA?
Yeah. So I bought 3 tax firms last year, Kyle. So I'm fully committed to this, right? We did over 6,000 tax returns in Allworth last year. So we have 50 tax professionals. To me, it all starts with what do you think what works best for that client? And where do you think this is going to go in the next 5 to 10 years? And I know for my situation, if I had the ability to have both taxes, investment management, estate, and all of that wrapped into one firm, convenience is important. Time is really important to me. And obviously you have to do things right and you have to be competent in what you do. But I think marrying all those together, you're going to get a better client outcome. And that's what it is all about for me, which is if you can help people do better tax planning, be able to do their tax preparation properly, and also weave in investments and financial planning, I think that's the right model.
This podcast is brought to you by Turncast. We make game-changing content.
Hey, this is Judd Mackerel. Thanks for listening to this show. I just wanted to ask you one question. What's your technology and data strategy for 2025? If you can't clearly answer that question, I'd love to talk. We are spending some specific time with select firms to really go deep and help you clearly answer that question. We believe that it's one of the things that often holds back firms from really achieving their potential, from really achieving growth, and really getting a lot of the things in the position that they need to be. The things that are holding up the way that you scale, like your workflows, how you manage data around your revenue, how you report all of that to your advisors, and getting clarity in all those things. I'm sure there's a lot of very specific things to your business that are really important as well. And we'd love to talk about that. If this is interesting to you, hit me up with an email. My direct email is judd@milemarker.co. And I'd love to hear from you, hear what you're working on, hear what your strategy is, and see if there's an opportunity for us to help you get more clear on that strategy in 2025. Thanks.
I'm curious about operationally how this works. So do you guys have the model where maybe the advisor, the quarterback of the relationship, and then just like they would bring in someone for investment specialty or research, are they just bringing in now a CPA who's a part of their pod or their team whenever that's required? Is that how that works? Or is it it's kind of a wall between them? When you need tax work, you go to this side of Allworth. When you need your planning work, you go to this side. How does that operationally work?
Yes. Listen, I think this is about the power of bringing everyone together for the client. And we believe that the advisor is the center of that relationship, but they should have the ability to bring in specialists. And I think it's unrealistic in today's world to think that an advisor can be an expert in everything, whether it's taxes, whether it's complex investment vehicles. And so our model is hire great advisors and then build an infrastructure around them so that it's both taxes, estate planning, investment management, insurance, and have experts come in as needed and with whatever the specialty is, right? So if you're a dentist practice, you want to learn about a cash balance plan, we've got tax experts that do that. Or if you're going to sell your business and you're going to come into $50 million, we have people that can talk to you about business valuation and estate planning and tax planning. So it starts with the client, but at the end of the day, the advisor's in the middle of all of it.
That's great. So how does that extrapolate to other stuff then, as I just dive deeper into the Allworth model? Are you guys bringing in people who are specialists in, the planning aspect? Do you have, an investment team that they bring in? Is it a team of specialists that I can call on as the advisor whenever you, the client, bring me something on the relationship side? Or How does that work?
Yeah, absolutely, Kyle. Exactly how you laid it out there, which is we've got a stable of experts that, let's say that you're meeting with a prospect or a client, you find out that they're selling their business, they're going to come into $30 million. We'll bring in the experts. You as the advisor can bring those experts in. And then it's Team Allworth, right? So I think that's better for the client as well, because there's more stability in that relationship. They get to know more people. We've proven out doing taxes for people. Clients are stickier than they would be if you don't do taxes. But it really is about what I would call best-in-class specialisms and making sure you've got the right people to come in at the right time in those conversations.
Yeah, that's awesome. So as you answer that, it brings me full circle somewhat back to the beginning of the conversation. So you bought 3 CPAs in the last year, you're processing these tax returns. Well, CPAs come with their own tech stack, right? And then you've got the tech stack for Allworth, and then there's always something new that's being added. And as you evolve, you're trying to figure out, how do we create this unified layer or vision of what technology can look like for Allworth? But then the tech is just this blob that keeps growing, right? Yeah. And growing, and you're adding something. I need something for estate planning now. I need something for this. I've got AI coming in. How are you guys wrangling all of the tech that is coming with the or the CPA acquisitions and then everything else you're doing?
Yeah, you know what? We did this right from day one, which is we have an integrated tech stack. So when people come in, we want them to join the Allworth brand. We want them they will adopt our tech stack. And we continually are tweaking that tech stack so that it isn't just a one and done. We want to have best-in-class tools that sit on the desktop. I'll tell you what's a bit more challenging, Kyle, is no one has yet cracked the code on the tax tech stack and the investment management financial planning tech stack. And so, we brought in outside consultants. We're probably a few months away from breaking that into a more manageable solution. It's still fine, but if you really think about scale down the road, and one of the challenges in the tax business is more and more people are leaving the tax business, and that new generation of tax planners not coming in. I'm a big believer you have to use technology to drive costs down, build scale. And so it's a big strategic effort for us. The other piece, Kyle, is probably 14 months ago, we built an AI council. So we have 2 leaders inside the business. We have representation from legal, compliance, advisors, marketing. And we have over 40 AI projects in flight right now at Allworth. And some are very specific to investment management. Some are more holistic across the client service base. We want to be seen as one of the early adopters that use AI to better the client experience and also help us build more kind of margin expansion, in which I then can reinvest that back in the business.
That's amazing. I'm glad you brought that up, because I wanted to ask you a little bit about how you're thinking about AI strategically. I know everybody is looking at it, they're pursuing it. There's been a lot of experimentation with it. And I know I've talked to several other people on the show about, it's great for marketing right now, or content, or sending emails, or doing this. But it sounds like you're doing stuff with, advisor prep and things like that. But there also seems to be an overall skittishness in the industry around letting it touch any sensitive data. There's regulatory question marks. Everybody seems to be trying to circle this and figure out what to do. Is that one of the reasons you started this council? And then how are you guys thinking about all of those things too, the sensitive data when it comes to AI?
Yeah, so it's exactly why we started the council. Our chief legal officer, former SEC lawyer, is on that council, and we take privacy and data very seriously. We've had a data lake and been in the data business for 5 or 6 years, so none of this is really new to us. But from my chair as a CEO, this is a push all the chips in the middle moment. I think the firms that don't adopt this and believe that the vendors that you're doing business with are going to be your AI engine, I think they're going to be left behind. I think that you need a combination of internal kind of people that can drive this, as well as your external vendors. We have ChatGPT that's available to every employee on an enterprise level. A lot of the innovation is coming from that kind of homegrown way of automating and making their lives easier. And we use Jump AI, which I'm sure you're aware of, and we were an early adopter. I met with them last week, and they actually showed me data on 646 conversations my advisors had over the last 2 weeks. And they broke down client sentiment based on the transcripts and the data that, the information they heard. And then I could drill down into what products and services were talked about. If we talked about investments, what part of the investment were we talking about, asset allocation or specific investments? And just that hour of kind of conversation with the data scientists at Jump AI, I walked away and said, this is not going to be like the World Wide Web. This is going to be totally transformational. And I think it starts with the client. I think that the knowledge level will be absolutely the same using AI. And what you're getting from your advisor today, individuals 5 years now will be able to do that by themselves. So if you're not willing to evolve your business and elevate how you meet with your clients, I think you're going to be in a bit of trouble.
That's fascinating. Let me make sure I understand this. So you guys have your own data lake and you have your data warehouse. And then you're plugging things like Jump and ChatGPT and everything into your data lake to ensure, hey, we have an audit trail, we have a paper trail, we feel comfortable about the privacy and security of all of this?
Yes, I'm sure my chief technology officer and chief legal officer, so John, be careful what you say here. So listen, we are very thoughtful about privacy and protection, right? Whether they're into the data lake for that or not. What we want to ensure is that we have employees that follow the right policies and procedures. So I'm confident that we're there. When you think about our data lake, where we started is really about helping advisors understand their practice. All of our advisors have a dashboard where they can measure just about everything in their practice. And I can get it on my phone, right? So if you were my advisor, Kyle, I could actually open up my phone, get onto ThoughtSpot, which is a vendor we use on their app. I could tell you, hey, in the last year, you've had 47 financial plans. You've talked to 30 of your clients about insurance needs. And we could have a robust conversation about how to manage your practice to be a better advisor and deliver better client results. And to me, that's the start of AI inside of Allworth, right? And it's really about leveraging data to be more insightful. And then we have everything across from how are you building financial plans using data and AI faster. And we're really excited about some of the internal initiatives we have going.
Incredible. I love that. I think that's amazing. And I think I agree with you. I mean, I think there's certain things where AI leaves a lot to be desired, in my opinion. But there's others that are truly mind-blowing. And you to go, okay, at the pace that this is changing and it's moving, there's a lot worth betting on in a meaningful way.
Well, and that's why you have to have compliance and legal at the table, right? This could end really poorly if you didn't have structure and discipline around this. And that's why we built the AI Council. That's why they meet weekly. That's why I get debriefed. I debrief the board on it. But I think it's a massive mistake if CEOs are not thinking about this as transformational change, not just a nice to have.
I love it. All right. You can't think about AI without thinking about the future. So this is an opportunity for you to get out your crystal ball. You've talked a little bit about how you believe people will be able to get what they kind of get from advisors now, maybe by themselves in the future. So you have to evolve your practice. Yeah. What are some of the things you're looking at? It can be AI, can be completely different, that are coming around the corner that you are trying to prepare Allworth for as it happens?
Yeah. The winners long-term in this industry are going to be the folks that can grow organically, period, end stop. Those that think that they're going to create superior shareholder value by just inorganic growth, I don't think that's possible. I think you have to be able to grow your business. And so I think 5 years out, the earlier comment you had about most firms not growing, I think that's going to that chasm is going to get wider. And I think that the valuations for those firms that aren't growing, you're going to see a steep decline. Because really, what are you buying? And right now, his valuations are pretty steep across the board. And and it just doesn't make a lot of sense, right? That 5 years ago when Scott and Pat started inorganic growth, there was a decent arbitrage in M&A. Now that's pretty much gone. So scale matters. I think the long-term vision or what AI will do for us continues to be a bit murky, but I think it's fair to say that clients will be able to do a lot of the things today that we do for them, whether it's Money Guide Pro, cash flow analysis of investments. So I think one of the great traits or skills that has been somewhat lost, and I've got a 10-year-old daughter and a 22-year-old daughter, is the ability to communicate. And I think that in the future, advisors will be more like counselors and coaches on a wide variety of things than they will be on experts on cash flow or investments. And I think the firms that actually help their advisors move in that direction are going to be the winners, because a lot of life, it's not about how much money you have. It's about how well you live your life. And if you've got things in your life that are challenging, right? Whether it's elder parents or children that, you can't seem to get out of the house, whatever it might be, I think those that are going to be better counselors and coaches are going to be the winners.
Well said, man. That's awesome. John, you're a great communicator. You're a great communicator. You do a great job breaking down concepts and laying this out. I've really learned a lot from you on this. All right, let's move into the final segment of the show. This is the Milemarker Minute. This is a series of lightning round questions. I know you're familiar with it because you've listened to the show a couple of times. So are you ready for the Milemarker Minute?
All right, let's let it rip.
Okay. If you could travel anywhere in the world you've never been to before, where would you go?
Churchill, Canada. So I have a daughter that's a zookeeper. She watches over penguins and a polar bear. And I would love to take my daughter to Churchill. It's one of the last places you can view wild polar bears. You have to either take a train or fly in. It's very remote in northern Canada. That is on my bucket list.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. I know it's a lightning round. I got to pause and just go. Do you have to is it like a camping situation? Do they actually have accommodations you can stay out there? Like, how does that work if you go to one of the natural places to view polar bears?
Yeah, you have accommodations, but polar bears are the most dangerous species of bears. People think of grizzly bears. I would have no problem being around a grizzly bear. I would be very fearful if I was around a polar bear. So
I've heard that.
You have to be very careful.
That's crazy. What's the best road trip you've ever taken?
That's a great question. So I visited all 50 states and I think 23 countries. So I've been on the road quite a bit in my career. I would say the best road trip is in Kodiak, Alaska, of all places, right? And I was able to go crab fishing. So think of deadliest catch. And I was able to go halibut fishing. And then I stood in a stream and no kidding you, probably 30,000 salmon swam by me. And I'm looking down the stream and I'm watching grizzly bears catch salmon and teaching their baby cubs how to fish. And so while I wasn't necessarily in my car, I was in a float plane for most of that. It was probably the most iconic kind of trip I've taken.
Memorable. That's amazing. So I know you love the wilderness and I know you love to be outside, but are you more of a mountains person or are you a beach person?
Mountains, 100%.
What's the best flavor of ice cream?
Oh, you must have called my wife before you did this because I have quite the sweet tooth. And I hate to admit it, but almost every night that I'm home with my daughters and my wife, it's a Dairy Queen night. So I'm pretty boring. I am a medium vanilla cone at Dairy Queen.
Okay. All right. As somebody who frequents Dairy Queen as well with my 4 kids, we like blizzards and I feel like it changes on a regular basis. But the soft serve vanilla Dairy Queen is underrated for all of you listening who haven't been in a while. Yeah. Quite good.
Yep.
I love it. Yep. What's the best book you've read or listened to in the last year?
I try to read 50 books a year. That's my goal. And some years I'm great at it. Some years I'm not so great at it. But I would say Atomic Habits is one that I have a nephew who's very entrepreneurial and wanted to find 1 or 2 books that helped him. And Atomic Habits was the book I gave him.
I love it. All right. Last question. There's an alternate universe. In this one, you are the CEO of Allworth, but in this other one, you don't work in financial services. You have a totally different career. What career did John Bunch have in this alternate universe?
I would love to be a fishing guide. I would love to be in a remote camp in northern Canada where I could help people really learn about the outdoors. And there's something about the strategy of fishing and just being there by yourself and really trying to find the right species is a big thrill for me.
That's amazing. Do you have a favorite type of fishing, like fly fishing or ice fishing, or it sounds like you did crab fishing? You've done a whole bunch of it. Is there one that you really jive with the most?
Yeah. So there's a fish called muskie and they call it the fish of 10,000 casts. And in Ontario, they have something that's called a master angler, which you have to catch a fish over a certain length. And it's a pretty big deal. And there's 5 categories. I've got 4 of the 5 categories. So I'm short 1. But it's not uncommon to get a 50-inch muskie on your line, which if you're a fisherman and you know a bit about fishing, that's a really big fish and muskies are hard to get. And I'd say that's really my specialty right now.
That's amazing. I love it. John, this has been so fun. I feel like I've not only learned a lot, but I've appreciated your perspective on a lot of these things. I think the industry is undergoing an immense amount of change right now. It seems like you've been very thoughtful about it, how you want to evolve and attack it as you go into this 3rd generation for Allworth. So thanks so much for coming on the show, talking about your plans, talking about how you guys are doing things, helping the audience learn from that, and then helping me learn as well. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you, Kyle.
Of course. All right, everybody, that's been another episode of The Next Mile. Thank you so much for paying attention. If you would, please click follow or subscribe wherever you're listening to this and leave us a review so people who've never heard of the show before or never seen a conversation can find great ones like I just had with John. But until the next episode, enjoy every mile.